all look very familiar, so I don't think we need an introduction. Who's right, sitting right here? It's only the Swami Swami Maharaj. Maharaj has been here almost close to a few days, a week, giving classes in and around our areas. So Maharaj will be here for another few more days, and please take advantage of his stay here. I'll hand over to Maharaj. Thank you. We'll give the details of the program. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
During this visit, Bhagavad Gita, middle six chapters of Bhagavad Gita begin with 7, and so far we've covered through 11. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So just one more chapter left in this middle six chapters, and then we're going to go to some other nice topics in relation to Bhagavad Gita. So because this is the Sunday program, and there's newer people, at least somewhat newer people. So this is intended to be a kind of Bhagavad Gita 101 class. But that's okay. You're very familiar, like many of the devotees here have been living the life of Bhagavad Gita for how many, Chuck? 40 years? 50 years? How many years have you been practicing Krishna consciousness? You! 33? 73. So that's 50 years. 50 years, because now 22, 23. Dark morning? 42 years. Yeah? 40, 50? 40. 40, 50. Okay, 40. Very good. Very good. You got your beat though. By 3 years. 53 years. The Bhagavad Gita is a very wonderful literature, transcendental literature, and the title is meant for newer people, but as Ram Gopal indicated, many of the persons here are veterans, have been around for quite some time, maybe not 50, 40 years, but some time. So we're going to touch on how Bhagavad Gita helps us address the goal of life, and to a degree, how Bhagavad Gita can help us in our day-to-day life. That comes towards the end. The Bhagavad Gita, as we see from this very beautiful painting, it's a dialogue between Krishna, who's Bhagavan, and that's how the name comes, Bhagavad, Bhagavat, Bhagavad Gita, in relation to Bhagavan. So it's translated different ways in English, the Song of God, or the Divine Song of Bhagavan, who is Krishna. And Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, and in the opening scene, chapter 1, Krishna asks his dear friend, who he knows to be the personality of Godhead, but there's the nature of a loving relationship between the personality of Godhead and such a dear friend. The Lord can have friends, and Arjuna is one of his intimate friends. He takes the position of the chariot driver, which is like a servant or subordinate to his own devotee. Krishna likes being subordinate to his own devotee because of their devotion. So Arjuna asks, he addresses Krishna as Ajita, Senayor Ubayor Ajita. He asks Krishna, who's unconquerable, taking the position of instructing the unconquerable one to draw his chariot in between the two armies. And there's the two armies. And seeing who's arrayed between the two sides, we know what happens. Arjuna says, I can't do this. And he gives some very plausible reasons. I've had recent discussions with devotees, good standing devotees who confided in me, I struggle with this, or I have struggled with this. How the how I agree with Arjun's views. He gives ethical reasons why having this battle isn't good. And I agree with him. And I struggle with the fact that he went ahead anyways. No, anyway, because there are sub-religious principles that are correct. They are to be observed. Sub-religious principles are to be observed. And then there's something else going on besides that, and that's the transcendental knowledge. Can this child find another place to play? Can the mother of the child help the child find another place to play? Or somebody other than the mother of the child help the child find another place to play? I'm going to wait until that happens. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Here's a very nice painting that shows the scene on the battle, and the two people who are discussing the scene on the battle are none other than Dhritarashtra, who's with the beard leaning over blind Dhritarashtra, and his dear assistant, Sanjaya. Sanjaya is a disciple of Vyas. And Sanjaya has been gifted with a power by Vyas to see and hear things that are happening remotely. Well, Prabhupada has likened it to transcendental television. With television, something's going on way over there, and then over here you can see it and hear it way over here. But they didn't have the technology that we have today. They had better technology. By mystic yoga, he could hear and see what was going on the battlefield. So he's narrating to Dhritarashtra, who we can see by his body language. He's really eager to hear what's going on and what the outcome is. And there's Krishna and Arjuna looking at the array of the two armies. He's seeing all this, describing it to Dhritarashtra. And here comes the part that Dhritarashtra is enlivened by. Arjuna is ready to put down his bow, giving his reasons why this isn't the right thing to do. 7 different reasons he gives. And the bow slips from his hand. I shall not fight. And then Krishna takes a different position. Arjuna gives more of his reasons. And then he submits, I'm bewildered. I don't know what's best for me to do. Please instruct me. And the scene changes, the mood changes. Rather than simply friends talking, Arjuna accepts the position of disciple, Shishya, and Krishna as the guru. Relationship between guru and disciple is like that, which means he wants to know, rather than saying this is what I'm going to do and why. He wants to know, because I don't know. I know that I don't know, and I want to know. So Krishna becomes his teacher, and he gives his teachings, the Bhagavad Gita. Here's a little paragraph that's used to explain Bhagavad Gita to people that don't know what it is. We're really off to a bad start this evening. 5 strikes and we're not even in the ball game. I'm going to read this little short paragraph. The Bhagavad Gita is universally renowned as the jewel of India's spiritual wisdom. Spoken by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to his intimate disciple Arjuna, the Gita's 700 concise verses provide a definitive guide to the science of self-realization. No other philosophical or religious work reveals in such a lucid and profound way the nature of consciousness, the self, the universe, and the supreme. So that's a promotional piece for Bhagavad Gita itself. Now let's start to go into Bhagavad Gita. When Srila Prabhupada wrote his Bhaktivedanta purports, he very closely followed the commentary of Baladev Vidyabhusan. Who's Baladev Vidyabhusan? Baladev Vidyabhusan is the previous Acharya who wrote extensively on many topics, and one of them was a very detailed commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And Baladev Vidyabhusan followed a classic procedure. The classic procedure that he followed was he gave a certain set of teachings and then repeated it thematically throughout his writings. So he as did Madhvacharya, the Nava Prameyas of Madhvacharya, in our line, for example. So here's the 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita. God is 5, count them. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, and Karma. One who understands these 5, Baladev Vidyabhusan says, one has grasped the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So we're going to go through these 5 quickly. A very nice BBT painting is this one that shows several of them in one painting. The Prakriti, in chapter 7 we discussed, Bina Prakriti Ashtada. Ashta means 8. There's 8 separated Bina material energies. And there they are, earth, water, fire, air, and all around the sky. That's 5. And then mind, intelligence, and false ego. I guess that's supposed to be the head of that body. And altogether that makes 5 plus 3 makes 8. So in addition to those 8 elements of Prakriti, within we see that little glowing star, that's the Jiva, and side by side with the Jiva is Paramatma, the Atma and Paramatma, Brahman and Parabrahman. And we heard in chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita that everything is a manifestation of these 2 energies, both of which are under Krishna's control. They're his energies, and the combination of the 2 under Krishna's direction makes everything that you find in material creation. So in this painting we see 3 of the 5. We see Prakriti, we see Jiva, and we see Ishvara in this one painting. Now what's the Jiva, or what's the living entity? Well, it's a nice thing. If you were listening carefully, one of the things that was expressed in that promotional paragraph for Bhagavad Gita is consciousness. Just a little sharing. What's consciousness? Anyways, and a little further piece to this. When Prabhupada's books were translated into Chinese, there was a big commotion over how to translate the word Chinese to consciousness, because there isn't a one-to-one synonym for consciousness. So as a result, there were 2 groups. Some said this is how it should be translated. Some said that's how it should be translated. And they went to war. And one side won. But consciousness is a very interesting thing. Consciousness, this is something that Prabhupada said that I heard several times, puzzled me. The soul is both conscious and consciousness. I heard it enough times that I could understand somehow this is important. So what What was he intending to say? Consciousness, one can say easily, is awareness. Awareness of oneself and awareness of what's around oneself. Inside and outside, within and without. So what's the soul is conscious and consciousness mean? So pondering it and pondering and pondering it, I finally came across something from the Upanishads that made it clear. Consciousness is likened to a lamp that is both luminous and lights up things in the room, like pots and plates. That's what the Upanishad says. That's the consciousness. So consciousness extends just like we're seated in the room. And we can see one another. We can hear some sound. You can hear the heating system going over here, or air conditioning system. When the child was babbling, I can hear that too. So its consciousness extends out. Sight, sound, smell, taste. Consciousness goes out like the luminosity of a lamp, and then the lamp itself is luminous. And it illuminates things. Conscious and consciousness. The soul is both. So consciousness is extending, but I'm here. And then there's supreme consciousness, and that supreme consciousness extends everywhere. Very simple. It's discussed in chapter 13. I plan to one evening, Tuesday evening, discuss chapter 13, because chapter 13 addresses this topic very specifically. Kshetra and Kshetragya. The Kshetra is the field, like an agriculturalist. He has a field, and he, the agriculturalist, is the knower of the field. So the field and the knower of the field are different. At the same time, Kshetragya cha api mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. There's two knowers of this field of activity, and that's the Supreme Soul. He not only knows my field of activity, he knows all fields of activity. That's pretty good. He's super conscious. He is the super soul. He is Parabrahman. And that's the beginning place of the instruction of Bhagavad Gita, or one could say, spiritual teachings of any kind will have some idea of the conscious entity. No, I won't go into it for this evening, but some evening we can go into it maybe. What do impersonalists and what do Buddhists say about consciousness? They have something to say about consciousness. Now, I think it's interesting that there's not a one-to-one correlation of a word in Chinese, because it expresses the same as consciousness, because words are symbols of something. And if you don't have an understanding of something, then you don't have a symbol for it. Although my experience with the Chinese devotees is when speaks of this teaching of Bhagavad Gita, the soul is within, and the Supreme Soul is side by side with the soul that's within. It's not difficult. That is to say, my understanding of that is, it's intrinsic. It's an understanding that's already within, even if the language doesn't facilitate it. What to speak or language facilitates it. But the difficulty is, we don't identify with the conscious self within. We identify with the covering of the conscious self within. And that's the starting point of Bhagavad Gita's message. So if you haven't picked up on it, I like visuals. Here's a visual. Here's an eggshell. And there's some light coming out of the eggshell. So what's that light coming out of the eggshell? Well, we don't really know because it's inside the eggshell. It's just something is coming out of it. It's like consciousness expanding from the body, but what's that conscious entity that's within? We just assume it's the body that's conscious, but it's not the body that's conscious. It's not the body that's conscious. It's the soul that's conscious. And consciousness expands and extends. So liberation is to take that light, and the light then becomes separated from the body. At least the self-identification. It's the starting point for Bhagavad Gita. As we all know, we're not the body. So if the soul is conscious in consciousness, what are some of the other symptoms of the soul? So let's go through the symptoms. It's from Bhagavad Gita. The soul can be experienced or perceived by the presence of consciousness, or the absence of consciousness. The soul has gone. Many spiritual traditions of the world accept consciousness as being a symptom of the soul. At the time of death, all physical and chemical components of the body remain in place, but something non-physical has been lost. Easy to understand. These are just characteristics. Even through our language, we identify ourselves as being different from the body. Just a little sharing. Now, the pandemic kind of turned everything upside down. But before the pandemic, it was a very common experience for me in different temples that had a program of reaching out to high schools and colleges and other educational institutions. We would go to their place, or they would come to our place. And particularly with the younger set, this is something that I found was very effective. The class is sitting there, and I felt like monarch butterfly. They just want to see where all the spots are and where the antlers are. What is it? What does one of these things look like? So it's under their microscope checking out the monarch butterfly. So I asked, who's the smartest kid in the class? And I found out everybody knows. In class, there's one kid that's the smartest kid in the class. And everybody points to the same person. The smartest kid in the class. Okay. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? Sure. I'm the smartest kid in the class. You can go ahead and ask me whatever you like. Okay. So point to your arm, point to your head, point to your foot, point to your leg. So those are body parts, right? Now, point to you. And they will kind of or they go like this. So wait a minute. There's my head, my arm, my foot, my leg. That's the object, and then there's the possessor of the object. Who's the I? And I go like this. The whole thing. So it's just to illustrate, even our language is distinct from the owner of the body and body. Kshetra and kshetragya. Consciousness and that which one is conscious of. Even the instruments of consciousness, the senses of perception are different than the perception. Here's a nice one. I'm sure many of you know about this. This is a painting. It's from the Back to Godhead article describing out-of-body experiences. Probably all of you are familiar with it. If you're not, it's okay. The first time I came across this, someone referred me to a book written by Dr. Michael Sabam, who was a heart surgeon and a professor at Emory University in Atlanta. And he writes in his book, one time, I was performing open heart surgery, and during the open heart surgery, the patient had cardiac arrest, heart stop. And when the heart stops, blood stops. And when blood stops, it doesn't go to the brain. So the brain isn't registering because blood's not going to the brain because the heart stopped. So they have a procedure. They have whatever you call these things, some kind of electrode that placed on the chest, and it simulates as if the heart is pumping so that the body keeps moving, or helps to prompt the heart to pump or something like that. And then sometimes the patient survives. Sometimes the patient doesn't survive. In this case, Dr. Sabam referred to a patient that survived, and then he went a couple of days later where the patient is recovering, the bedside manner of a good physician. How's it going? How are you feeling? And the patient described to him his out-of-body experience during cardiac arrest, where he said to the doctor, I was floating up above the operating table, and I heard the assistant say to you, the machine says the heart stopped, whatever the language is. And then you said to a certain assistant, this one by name, you get the electrodes, you did this, the procedure, that procedure, and the whole thing. He described exactly what happened while he was watching from above the operating table. So as far as medical science goes, that's a no-no. Because the implication is, listen carefully, the seat of consciousness is not the body. Because the body stopped working. The brain, the part that registers conscious events, stopped because the heart stopped. But this person survived that experience and described it from a position floating above the operating table. And then later is telling him about so there's visual, auditory, and memory that's independent of the body or the brain or anything to do with the machine. So the doctor writes that there's got to be some explanation for this. So, long story short, it's a book, it's about that big. He asked others in the same field, and others reported some similar experiences with their patients. Now it's OBE, kind of acronym, out-of-body experience. And it turns out it's a common thing. I mean, not terribly common, but people have out-of-body experiences. And some are certainly not in a hospital where there's professional physicians observing all of this, so they know they're not making stuff up. Anyway, the other people have out-of-body experiences at the time of an automobile accident or something, but it doesn't have the same control as in a hospital during open heart surgery. So he concluded, I'm reluctant to say this. Not that he's an atheist, but he's a scientist. And I'm reluctant to say this, but consciousness is not from and of the body. It may be experienced through the body, but it's not of and from the body. So one might call that the soul. And there's lots of literature on this. Lots of literature. I read one more, and that this was a lady heart surgeon from some similar, university in the state of Washington, out-of-body experience during heart surgery. And in her case, it's really far out, the patient not only floated up above the operating table, they floated across the ceiling, out the window, up 2 flights, and found themselves looking inside the window of a janitor's closet 2 flights above, and described what was inside the closet, and described that there's a little ledge hanging above the janitor's closet you can't see from inside. You have to be outside to see it, or and a flight above, and you can look down, and there's a pair of sneakers of a certain color and certain rip and different colored shoelaces. And the patient described this to the physician a couple of days later. What's this? She went and asked the janitor. She said, I keep the janitor's closet locked. No one can get in. But the description is what the person just saw. And then she went up a flight, and she looked down. There's a little ledge, and there's the sneakers that you can't see from inside. What's this? She did the same thing Dr. Sabam did. I forget her name. And, others, similar experiences, and she came to the same conclusion. So her conclusion was much softer. Sabam was more skeptical. There's got to be an explanation for this. The explanation is the seat of consciousness is other than the body. Consciousness doesn't stop when the body stops. It's not proof. There's some other logical explanation, or plausible explanation, but it points to, now the proof is Scripture. And this is evidence that confirms or indicates the veracity of Scripture. Now I'm going to keep going, because along with the soul is the seat of consciousness, and as consciousness expands out, there's a concept that's in Bhagavad Gita, Dehi nosmin yata dehe, the soul moved from one body to the next. And I'm sure, because I'm looking around the room, some of you have been to Los Angeles and have been to the LA Rath Yatra and the LA Temple. And those of you that haven't been, maybe one day you'll go. So when you go to the LA Temple, as you're looking at the temple, over on the right side is the temple and the deities, Rukmini, Dwarkadish, etc. Over on the left side is Govinda's restaurant, and above that is a gift shop. And in between, there's this. It's the first American theistic exhibit. And the acronym is FATE. First American theistic exhibit that was created under the direction of Srila Prabhupada. There's some nice history, Leela how that happened. But long story short, there are dioramas or sculptures that depict teachings of Bhagavad Gita or pastimes of Krishna, etc. And one of them, when you go there, if technology is working, you go in front of a big mirror. It looks like a mirror, but it's a mylar mirror that, when light is right, you can see through it. And if light is indifferent, it's just a mirror. So you feel like you're in India because the light goes out. And then you hear this dreamy music. And you hear this deep, resonating British voice saying, because you're looking at it, it's light behind you, and it's showing all the people looking at this mylar mirror. And the voice says, take a good look at yourself. Who are you, really? Are you the body? And then some softer music. And then a spotlight goes on. Maybe they've done the technology differently, but this is what I saw. Spotlight goes on to this guy right here. You hear the sound of a heartbeat. Dun, 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 dun. There's the baby in the womb with this music going on. And there's a light. The light goes out and it switches to this one. And you hear a baby crying. I'm not going to make the sound of a baby crying. And then the light goes on. And then that light goes out, and it goes over here. Then it's the babbling of a small child. And then that light goes out, and you hear some children playing in a schoolyard, and then bouncing a ball. And it keeps, the sound effects tell you the soul is passing. And when it gets over here, this guy's holding a money bag, and you can hear the jiggling his money bag, and so forth. And then you get over here, the guy starts coughing, and you know what's next. So then the voice comes on and starts explaining the soul, from Bhagavad Gita. It's a visual that helps get it. It's not difficult to get it, but some people have a difficulty getting it. Although it's pretty simple, very common sense. As the soul passes in this life from babyhood to boyhood to youth to old age, so similarly the soul passes. So that's something about a combination of matter and spirit. And then the controller of both, a little bit more about the controller of both. At the top, that's Krishna, and he's the controller. He's the controller of Prakriti, and he does so. He's not like, a megalomaniac. He's not over-controlling things. He just gives authority to the three modes of nature, and they control things. It's right in Bhagavad Gita, the three modes of nature. And down below, that's, the working class man and the corporate guy. The corporate guy thinks I'm controlling the working class guy, and they're both being controlled by the modes of nature. And material nature is controlled by Ishvara. So now we have three. We haven't gotten to, there's two remaining. The two that are remaining are time and karma. So at the bottom, that's karma. So we're going to hear something more about karma, but it's there visually. And now we're going to come to one of the most mysterious parts of all of Bhagavad Gita, and that's time. Has anybody seen time? There's cartoons about time. Death. This guy in a black cloak and carrying a sable over his shoulder. Death. So, time is not, that's not a personification of time, it's the depiction of time. Time is Shakti, Kala Shakti. Time is one of God's energies. Time is the most powerful force in the material world. And ultimately, it's the ultimate among killers. It's the cause of all transformations within material nature. So time, although we can't see it, we can see the hands of the clock, tick, 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 that's the seconds, and then the minutes, and then the hours, and so forth. We can measure the movements of time, but we can't see the movements of time, other than its effect. But time moves in cycles. And I'm going to spend a little bit of our evening together, a little bit, in describing this cycles of time, or Kala Chakra. I hope you don't mind. I find it interesting. And if you don't find it interesting, I'll try to make it short. But I find it interesting. If many of you know, older devotees here know Sadhaputta. And one, the last topics he was spending a lot of his research in was the topic of time. It's very mysterious. It's very important. It's not easy to understand. It's influencing us everywhere all the time. So there's cycles of time in the universe. We're going to take a look at that. 6 transformations that are all by the influence of time. We talked about it a little bit during our Bhagavad Gita discussions, how the process of creation, how's the process of creation work? Time is involved, for sure. So what happens, very quickly, Mahavish, during cosmic annihilation, because there's creation, maintenance for some time, withdrawal of creation, resting for some time, then again creation. When it's time for creation, Mahavishnu, who's holding within his abdomen, within his body, samasti, that's all living entities. He has 2 desires. Over there he sees the reflection of Rama Devi, his internal potency, and she wants some service. There's nothing for her to do. She wants to do. So he just desires that she'd have some service. And a second desire is the living entities that are in their sushupti state, deep sleep state, kind of like anesthetized state. He wants them to be happy. When you're anesthetized, you're not going to feel happiness, you're just feeling nothing. So he desires that they can experience the fullness of the potential for happiness. Those are two desires. With those two desires, Rama Devi knows, her master, as he's glancing at this external energy, pradhan, within that glance, she transfers all the living entities and time energy. Because you can't have anything without, you can't have material creation without time. Within her realm, it's eternal time. She transforms it into the kind of time that we know, the past, present, future time. But actually, time is eternal. The origin of time is eternal. And then so creation happens. When it's time for cosmic annihilation, it's really simple. You pull the plug. The plug is, she withdraws the time energy, and the whole thing collapses. Like these things that have people in the front yard during Christmas time. Santas and this and that. You know, during the day, they pull the plug, and it's just this pile of something in the front lawn. And then when it's the evening, they pump it up again. And then they pull the plug. So, to pull the plug on creation, you just withdraw time. It's over. The whole thing collapses. It goes back to its unmanifest state. It's really simple. In principle, it's simple. I mean, its procedure is a little involved, but the principle is simple. So time energy makes things move. It brings things into being. It brings transformation to things that are being, and it withdraws them. Creation, maintenance, and dissolution. Without time, you don't have them. Krishna says, we discussed it just today, midday, time I am, the destroyer of the worlds. Under the influence of eternal time, the cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated at regular intervals. Now, eternal time becomes transformed into the past, present, and future time that we're aware of. It's a feature of eternal time by Rama Devi's empowering eternal time to act differently. So if you had to draw time, if you were a BTG artist, you might come up with this one. This is one painting of time, sitting on a big chair, making judgments and bringing things into being and destroying things. Here's another one. Time. I'm going to try to go quickly, but the topic is really nice. Some of you have heard of an astrolabe. Astrolabe? Who's heard of it before? An astrolabe. Okay. Supposing you were a sailor, a captain of a ship, and you got in your ship and you wanted to go from point A to point B across the ocean. You want to go from London to New York, or New York to London, or someplace across the sea. You get in the sea. Where are you? How are you going to navigate your way? You have two things. You have a compass, so you know what direction you're headed in, and you have an astrolabe that tells you where you are in the sea. And the astrolabe is working on the principle of Kala Chakra. Here's a little diagram that shows there's two. There's a back and a front part. The back and the front part are called mater. This is Latin. And I'm not going to describe to you how it works. But if you look around on the one on the left side, the back, you see the zodiac. You see it? And you see that piece that's moving on the front side That's also the zodiac. And without the detail of explaining how it works, you know the direction. You look at the stars at night. Of course, if it's cloudy sky, you can't see the stars at night. But if you can see the configuration of stars, and you can line up the astrolabe, you can tell where you are in the sea, day or night. It's an instrument for one of the reasons it's there is for navigation. And the reason for going into this is it's based on Kala Chakra. I'm going to show you a little video. I promised those two boys yesterday that we're going to show a little video, and I don't see them here. Are they here? No. He said he didn't know if he'd be able to come. But you're going to pick up on this because you already know what an astrolabe is. Some of you, most of you, if not all of you, know what the TOVP is, Temple of Vedic Planetarium. This is a rendering of what it's supposed to look like when it's done. And in the central dome, that's Radhamadava. And the dome to the right is going to be Lord Nrsimhadev. And the dome to the left, that doesn't show so well in this drawing, but it's the Vedic Planetarium. In the Vedic Planetarium, it depicts the movement of Kala Chakra. Because Kala Chakra is part of how the universe moves. It's part of the universe is created and how it moves and how it's withdrawn. So I'm going to show you a video, but just a quick explanation so that you're not totally surprised by what you see and hear. The movement of the sun creates day and night, and the movement of the sun creates seasons. And you're going to hear the narrator, the person that's narrating in this video, is the person that's the overall in charge of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. A very nice devotee. He has an Australian accent, but you can understand what he's saying. And his name is Antardweep. Antardweep. And he's going to explain to you what this shows in this little diagram. And then we're going to go to the video. If you were to take away those three little smaller boxes, you'll see this golden mountain in the middle called Mount Sumeru. And there's an axle upon which the sun, the chariot of the sun god is riding. So one side of the axle is the top of Mount Sumeru. The other side of the axle is a wheel. You see the wheel. And the wheel is moving on the axle. And the chariot of the sun god is mounted on the axle. And the axle moves with the speed of Kala Chakra. And the Kala Chakra, listen carefully, Kala Chakra moves very quickly in a clockwise direction. The Kala Chakra, the wheel of time, moves very quickly in a clockwise direction. And the chariot of the sun moves very slowly in a counterclockwise direction. This is discussed in 5th Canto Bhagavatam. Pardon me, but I find it fascinating. Maharaj Pariksit says, wait a minute. He doesn't use that tone, but wait a minute. You said the sun is moving in a clockwise direction. Now you just said the sun moves in a counterclockwise direction. Which is it? He gives a very simple explanation. Shukadeva Goswami says, picture, so I'm inviting you, picture a potter's wheel, and it's moving very quickly in a clockwise direction. Zoom, 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 zoom. And imagine on the potter's wheel, there are some ants. So the ants are moving very quickly in a clockwise direction. But imagine those ants are simultaneously walking very slowly in a counterclockwise direction. So you can say they're moving in a counterclockwise direction, and that's in 1 degree per day times 360 makes a full circle. The sun is moving on Kala Chakra 1 degree per 24 hours in a counterclockwise direction, which accounts for seasons. And very quickly, like the potter's wheel is moving quickly, they count for day and night. And the wheel of the wheel of the chariot. Now look at the big painting or drawing, and then look at the one on the lower left. There's something the wheel of the chariot is riding on. And that little skinny thing that it's riding on is a mountain. And you're going to hear the name of that mountain. It's one of the mountains in the picture of Bhumandala, Manasotra mountain. So you'll hear him say Manasotra mountain. So now at least you have some visuals of how Kala Chakra works. So if technology is going to cooperate, I really hope it does. It's very short. It's only a few minutes long, but this is the Temple of Vedic Planetarium's gift to us to explain the planetarium with its moving parts. So I'm going to say a few things before I start the video. At the very bottom, down here.
So at the bottom of the planetary display, we have Shesha holding up the earth. This is Shesh, the empowered incarnation. There we have Ananta speaking Bhagavatam to the 4 Kumaras, and above the 7 subterranean planets. Here we can see Jambudvip, the central island of Bhumandala, and Bharatvarsha is situated on the southern side of that. It's 8 other Varshas, with Ilavrita Varsha in the center, various supporting mountains with large trees upon them, described in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the very center of Ilavrita Varsha is Mount Meru, Golden Mountain. Atop Mount Meru are the cities of important demigods, Lord Brahma in the center, 8 Dikpalas in the cardinal directions and sub-directions. Moving out, we can see the broader Bhumandala, 7 concentric islands and oceans surrounding them. The 7th of these islands is Pushkaradweep. On that island is Manasotra mountain, and on the mountain there's various cities of demigods such as Indra. Out further is Loka mountain. These large elephants stand atop Loka mountain to balance Bhumandala. Outside of Loka mountain is Aloka Varsha, which is dark. The rays of the sun and the other luminaries extend up to Loka mountain. On Manasotra mountain here on Pushkaradweep, the sun travels above this mountain at the southernmost point of its annual orbit. Above Bhumandala is Bhuvarloka, which is the residence of the Charanas, Siddhas, Yakshas, Gandharvas. And above there is Swargaloka, beginning from the sun and extending up to the pole star Dhruvaloka.
There's the Kala Chakra.
This is the moving part of the planetary display. Here we can see the sun and the moon moving in their chariots. The chariots are being drawn by horses moving in the anti-clockwise direction, but they're traveling with the wheel of time moving in the clockwise direction faster, so it looks as if they're moving backwards. Above them the zodiac of stars, more planets, and another realm of stars. So here we can see everything moving with the Kala Chakra, circumambulating the axis that connects Mount Meru with Dhruvaloka. Above these planets, we come to the planet of the 7 sages, the Saptarshi. You can see them here. They're commonly known as the Big Dipper, and then in Dhruvaloka, the pole star. On the ocean of milk situated there, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who is the Paramatma within everyone's heart, he resides on Anantashesh. Moving up beyond there, we have Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. In this video, we haven't included many of the details for there, but on Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, we have residences of the Lord, such as Lord Varaha, Lord Vamana, and so on. Here's Brahmaloka, and on Brahmaloka, we also have a form of the Lord Garbhodakshaya Vishnu as the Sahasrashesha Purush. Beyond there is the 7 coverings of the universe, earth, water, fire, etc. And outside of the universes is the abode of Lord Shiva, Shiva Loka. There he resides eternally. Beyond Shiva Loka, we come to Mahavishnu, Karanodakashaya Vishnu, with innumerable universes that are emanating from the pores of his transcendental body. Here you can see him being served by Rama Devi. Then we come to the Brahmajyoti, the effulgence of the Lord's transcendental body. Penetrating through the Brahmajyoti, we come to the Vaikuntha planets. We're showing 24 planets of the Vaikuntha realm in this model. The Lord, with 4 arms, is holding the conch, disc, club, and lotus, and the various combinations of those 4 make 24. Then we come to Goloka Vrindavan. Here we can see Radha Madhava, but we'll also be showing the other primary rasas. Krishna with the cowherd boys, Krishna being served, Krishna with Mother Yashoda. So this is an overview of the planetary display to be shown in the main dome of the temple.
If you had trouble following that, don't worry. It's a simplified depiction of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. When the Temple of Vedic Planetarium is completed, as you go up, there's going to be floors and there's going to be exhibits for people to go and see what it says out there. They go to the next floor, what it says out there. So that, with displays and interactive things that can help you understand a little bit more than you just heard. But it's the structure of the universe, which there's a moving part and there's some non-moving parts. But the moving part specifically for our purpose is Kala Chakra. Chakra means wheel, a disc. So that disc, Kala Chakra, is moving, and with it is moving the sun, and vertically above the sun is the moon, and vertically above the moon are other heavenly planets, and then above the other heavenly planets there's the Saptarishis, and above the Saptarishis there's Dhruvaloka, and the whole thing is described in the 5th canto Bhagavatam and depicted here. And then so there's something above Dhruvaloka, Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Brahmaloka. The 4 plus 3 generally equals 7. Bhu-loka, or Bhu-mandala, Bhuvar, Loka, and then Swargaloka, up to and just below Dhruvaloka, and then there's 4 more above that. So all of this is just to help us understand one of the important topics, a little bit of one of the important topics in Bhagavad Gita. Now, Bhagavad Gita doesn't give this cosmology thing. It's just to help us understand time that moves everything. Time moves. And everything is connected to time, and time moves everything. It brings into being, it moves things, and it withdraws things. All under the direction of the Supreme. Time I am. So now, back to the topic that was at the very opening page of our discussion. There's problems of life. And they're depicted here, 2 of them, birth and death. And then there's what goes inside, in between birth and death. Like that's called life. And what's supposed to go in there? Many people don't know what the purpose of what's supposed to go in there. And therefore, there's a struggle. So the Vedic way of life encourages us to ask the question, who am I? What's the standard of true happiness? What's my personal purpose in life? Am I experiencing the life of others' expectations? How do I solve the real problems of life? So there's, at the end of class, there's a mailing list. And if you're not on the mailing list, you can find out how to get your name on the mailing list. There's this nice chart. It's a PDF. It's hyperlinked. Hyperlinked means you click on that line, and with your browser, it'll take you, if you're on whatever your browser system is, it'll take you to the place in database where each one of these problems is addressed in Bhagavad Gita. Cool, huh? So finding solutions to problems in Bhagavad Gita. So you'll get a copy, you put it on your computer, and hyperlink it, and it'll tell you where in Bhagavad Gita it expresses solutions to these problems. Very practical. And we'll end with our offering of our respects to our founder Acharya, who's given us, not just he's given us Bhagavad Gita, but Bhagavad Gita that's very accessible, meaning it's quite easy to understand. There's complexity in the message of Bhagavad Gita, but it's very understandable. And when you understand it, it makes it much easier to apply it, besides it's something high and I really don't understand it. And today is New Year's, right? So I'm going to play a little 2.5-minute video. Hopefully it'll cooperate. And it's just nice Prabhupada speaking about New Year's. Maybe some of you have seen this already.
Every day is a new year. Nova Nova Ioma. However, Krishna consciousness strength is so nice. The more you advance, you see New Year. New Year. Yes. Nothing is old. People are saying that they are simply chanting the old slogan, Hare Krishna. But we are feeling new pleasure in every moment. Take any other chanting, chant more than 3 hours. But the Hare Krishna mantra we can chant, but chant. So unless there is new, how we can do that?
Short. So Happy New Year every moment. And here's one last. Bhavatute Shubham Nava Vatsaram. May the new year be all auspicious to you. May the new year grant you 9 types of bhakti. Nava Vatsaram. May the beautiful lotus foot of Sri Krishna, which is worshipped by great devas like Lord Shiva, ever manifest in your heart with great joy. So that's a nice New Year benediction. So Happy New Year to all of you. And Happy Bhagavad Gita to all of you too. Srila Prabhupada. Good. It's 7 o'clock, and according to the schedule, the class is over. So, should I take questions or just end? 5 minutes. Any topics I'd like to bring up within the 5 minutes that we have? Yeah.
Maharaj, when you were describing like the picture, you said Mount Sumeru, but in the video they said Mount Sumeru, but in the video they said Mount Meru. Are they the same thing?
It's the same.
Oh.
Meru, Sumeru. Mount Meru. You're careful listeners. That's good.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I have a question. Like in the planets of, the higher, the planets of the demigods, like Lord Indra and everything, they are not able to, perform bhakti rare, right? So why is that?
Why do you say that? They perform bhakti. They're not Shuddha bhaktas, but they perform bhakti.
Okay.
They worship the Lord.
Even in those planets.
Yes, they do. Would you like a nice reference? Sure. The nice reference is go to Brihat Bhagavatamrita, where Gopakumar visits Indraloka and he sees Indra worshipping his younger brother, Vamana. Vamana resides with Indra and he comes out. Indra worships him, and after worship, he goes back. So it's worship of the Supreme Lord in Indraloka, etc. Okay? Chandra worships. Surya worships. They worship. They're bhaktas. They do devotional service. Not just they not only worship, they engage in devotional service of all descriptions.
So, Maharaj, is it possible for them to go to higher lokas from there?
Sure. Depends. You can go up or down.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. The tendency is, there's a pause. The tendency is to become intoxicated by opulence. So indulging the senses in the opulence while still doing some service. The chine punye marcha lokam vishanti. The tendency is to use up the fruits of their pious deeds and then again come down. But it's not necessary for that to happen. They can go up. They can. Same for the planets above the demigod's realm. Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Brahmaloka, to go up to the spiritual realm. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You don't need a microphone. You go right ahead. You don't need a microphone, but here's a microphone. Go right ahead. You need my permission.
So, Hare Krishna, everybody. We'll chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra before I make the announcement. Let us do it together. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.